Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And in this video we are going full on old school retro. It looks like I'm showing you some late 80s, early 90s Rogue Trader era beaky marines. Now these are modern miniatures, but very much full of that old school vibe. Now these are retro marines, and that's literally what they're called, by bequest Miniatures, sold through Hagen Miniatures, and I'll try to drop the links down below so you can have a look. And if you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know that a few months ago I did the Star Rogues miniatures from, again, bequest, which are kind of his more modern era of marines. These are slightly smaller, very much inspired by beaky marines of the good old days of old, and I will do some size comparisons with these and original Rogue Trader models in a couple more minutes on the video. Now there's 5 models in the range, that is all that's available, and you can see here not too many parts. You know, they're all armed with bolters, sergeant with a fist and a plasma pistol, very typical of what the Rogue Trader era marines had, and they come in 1, 2 or 3 parts depending. So the sergeant's all in one piece, you know, all the backpacks all cast in together, all that kind of stuff there, and some with a little bit of assembly to do in terms of the guns. And these are very, very old school inspired models. If you kind of grew up through that era, you will very much recognise how to assemble and paint these, and they do really, really sort of smack of that era where everything was done by hand, all hand sculpted, you know, spun cast models, radically different to what a modern marine it looks like and also is kind of assembled and built like. Now, point to note, before I even started assembling it and gluing it, I did do the cleanup and then I washed the models because they do come with like a mould release agent on. You saw me rub my fingers together then, so give them a good clean. And it's really same as you would a plastic model, pair of clippers, hobby knife, that kind of stuff, but being that little bit more careful. It is metal, so it can be a little bit more difficult to slice through. And you can see the first thing I sliced off there was the slotter base that goes between the feet, and that's how all Games Workshop models used to come in the old days, and you'd put them in a slotter base. I contemplated putting them into a slotter base. I do still have some knocking around that I've had in a bag for probably 20 odd years, but I want to use them for my modern armies, so I'm basing them up onto 32mm bases so that I can use them with my normal Space Marines. Now, it comes to assembly, super glue, you could just use super glue to put them together, but I find the bond can be slightly brittle and they'll break apart. So I've just mixed up some green stuff. You can see a tiny blob there on the end of the arm. Put the super glue down, push the green stuff into it, and then that will seal and set really, really solid, and also gives you, if they do end up breaking, because you can break metal models a lot easier than plastic, you'll have some good contact points to put it back together. Now, when it's had a little bit of drying time, just taking a sculpting tool that's been wet at the end, so that isn't super glue on my fingers, that is water, so you can work with the green stuff easier, just slicing it out of there and making the joins a bit smoother. Now, comparing these retro marines to my last remaining RTB01, and you can really clearly see where the inspiration came from. Now, back in the day, Games Workshop started off with the white metal models, and the RTB01, the plastic set, was their first plastic marine set. Now, these look more like the original metal marines than they do the RTB01s, because RTB01s were a bit more uniform, and that's what you'll see when we're going through the painting here. These models are not uniform in any way, and that is the joy of kind of these models, really, the fact that a human has sculpted them, a human's had all that input, which is why you will find that the guns are slightly different on each model, because they've not been, you know, multi-pressed or whatever. The shoulder pads are different, the little nodules on the shoulder pads are different. Now, I'm not going to talk you through what I've painted, how I've painted them. I am putting the colours up the top there, but this is the exact same colour scheme as my pre-Heresy Death Guard colour scheme, because again, I want to use these models. I don't want them to be something I paint up and then completely forget about, so I am kind of building a retro pre-Heresy Death Guard scheme together. Now, points to note, when you are painting these models, this is more about the metal. It is a slightly different experience painting a metal model than it is painting a plastic or resin model, because the paint goes on slightly differently. You know, the spray paint that you've undercoated them with adheres to the model slightly differently. As you're moving the models around in your hand and looking at things, you'll discover things on one model that are not on another model. You know, the bolters are all slightly different looking. As I'm going around the gun casings here, you can see the sort of ejection port and stuff on the side of this bolter is further down the bolter than it was on another one, and that's the lovely part about these models. You know, someone has actually sculpted these by hand as an actual human, and it might mean the joints aren't quite right, and you know, how the elbow positioning isn't necessarily quite right or as crisp as you would get on a modern miniature. But this is really what all minis used to look like back in the day, and it is a joy going back to that painting. This is not the sort of unit or set of figures that would suit everybody. It's absolutely not. You know, some people would be driven bonkers by the fact that, you know, on some of these models the eye lenses are really easy to get into because they've been done quite well at the front of the things, and yet one of the models, the eye lenses are so sunk back that you actually can't see the lens. It just looks like a hole in the helmet. I really like that. I think it adds bags of character. To some people it would drive you nuts. Painting faces, for example, and I used to love this about Games Workshop models as well. There was no way in in the old days that you would ever get a helmet on the size of the heads that the Marines used to have. Same here. You know, look at the size of the sergeant's head. It's way bigger than the actual helmet that goes into it. Now, I love that. Might drive some of you bonkers. Now, in terms of the paint scheme I'm doing, I will reference it very briefly. It is my pre-heresy kind of Death Guard colour scheme, and all I'm doing is flat layering. And you'll see here, actually, you can see a lot of the metal showing through, because the original base coat I did was a black and a lead belcher, and you can even see some of the paint's a bit streaky. It's not entirely gone solid and see-through, and that's a deliberate part of my paint scheme. So I've done, you know, a couple of thin layers on most of these areas. I'm going to do a wash layer later that just tones all that back down, and then do another paint layer on top. So when you're looking thinking, oh, the paint's gone on there real streaky, some of that is to do with the fact that it's a metal model it's going on, and paint definitely goes onto a metal model differently, but some of it is just my general paint style. And I probably haven't got the ideal paint style for these models, because I remember back in the day I would never do this painting style on the original Marines, because with these kind of models where the detail and things isn't necessarily as crisp and defined as it is on modern models, you have to almost paint in some of that detail yourself, which my style of painting maybe doesn't suit quite as well as other people's style. But yeah, leave that to yourself now to judge. Now, here's something that's interesting. Doing the studs on the shoulder pads, the studs are not uniform across the pads here, so they're not running in the same lines. They're in different places on each model, so you've got to just learn to love those foibles of these models. See here now, it's the wash stage after the paint has thoroughly dried, and this is really wasn't a technique that was done back in the day when these style of models or this kind of sculpting was really around. The sort of heavy metal style painting, as it's called, with really vibrant highlights and all those kind of things, was really what was coming into the fore when this sort of style model was about. And I think a lot of that, well, whether it was or not, maybe we were making things up, but I think a lot of that was due to the fact that the models didn't have a huge amount of detail on. So you had to sort of over highlight and put lots of sort of edge highlights on there to make the details of the model really stand out, because the sculpting wasn't quite as good as you get on a modern model. I do find my current technique works way better on modern models than it does on old school models, and you can definitely see that in, if you have a look at White Dwarf, whatever, if you've got any kind of thing online, the painting standards nowadays are absolutely incredible on modern models, because the modern models enable you to do that. If you're down at Warhammer World and you see the Warhammer Museum, for example, and you see this era of model, it's definitely not as well painted as the modern era, as technology has advanced in terms of paints as well, but also the models lend it to better paint jobs, which does mean, actually, if you're buying this type of model and you're an average painter, and I very much would class myself as an average painter, you can get some amazing results on these models because of the lack of tons and tons and tons of detail. So they are fairly simple, they are fairly easy to paint in that way, but probably harder to make look incredible, if that makes sense. I might just have made complete gibberish, but that's kind of my thoughts on these models. They're quite quick and easy to paint, doesn't rely on tons and tons of different colours and loads of different detail, because they are literally armour, gun, maybe a pouch here and there, and nothing too complicated when you're painting them. Although the flesh is a little complicated to do on the sergeant just because of how big his head is, but again, lovely. So really just trying to talk you through the foibles and the fun of doing these models, and I absolutely loved painting them. I really do enjoy them. It is something radically different from a modern Space Marine. You think it wouldn't be, but it really is. It's a different kind of experience of painting, and it's a different experience of what the models look like when they are finished. So again, showing you the finished article, very quite, you know, a naive colour scheme and sort of cartoony kind of vibe to them, I suppose you might say it. Less of the modern kind of grim dark, everything looks exact era, but I really do love them. So I don't know if I've put you off these models or put you towards them, but if you are a fan of old school cool, I really do think these models are great. I think really looking forward to sticking them together with my other retro models. And again, we'll drop another comparison with the RTB01 here when you look at the painted minis. And just, yeah, you can really see the inspiration brought up to the modern day, and I have thoroughly kind of enjoyed painting them. So I said before, if you do fancy getting hold of these models, Bequest Miniatures is the guy who sculpts them. Hagen Miniatures is the one who casts them up and sells them for him. I am not in any way sponsored. I bought these models out of my own money, which I do everything on the channel, just because I love them and it is a proper blast from the past. So if you've enjoyed that, and hopefully my ramble hasn't been too crazy today, yeah, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. Hopefully I will see you on another video. And if you do enjoy this retro stuff, you know, drop a comment down below. Or, you know, if you want me back to the more modern stuff, I'll probably be doing that for a while as well. All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye.